Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to talk about what to look for when buying coffee at a retail store, as well as some of the red flags to look for and try to avoid. It can often feel overwhelming when you're at the store looking to buy coffee and you see so many different options from so many different roasters. In today's video we're going to try and make sense of all that and take that wide selection and narrow it down into something that makes it a bit easier for you to decide. So the first question we really need to ask is, why does it matter? As with any ingredient in a recipe, great coffee starts with great beans. The right choice can elevate your coffee experience from just okay to absolutely amazing. Plus, understanding how to look for coffee in a retail store can help you avoid the pitfalls associated with poorer quality coffee, including a less than ideal cup, as well as the extra cost associated to trying to find that right cup of coffee. So what should you look for when buying coffee from a retail store? And just as importantly, what are some of the red flags that you should avoid? Stick around because we're about to answer all of those questions right now. Okay, so let's dive into some of the key factors that you should look for when you're looking to purchase coffee from a retail store. To do that, we need to break down several different aspects of the retail packaging label to understand what to look for so that we can make informed buying decisions. First up, we have the roast date. Now, to me, this is one of the most important things that you need to be looking for when you're approaching a retail packaging label. Freshly roasted coffee is at the peak of its flavor within the first few weeks of roasting. We're really talking about that 1 to 2 week time window post-roast for optimal flavor. Now, a lot of this is unrealistic within a retail setting, especially considering that a lot of that has gone from the roaster into an intermediary like a distribution center or warehouse, and then finally onto its in retail shelves like a grocery store or a convenience store or something like that. So usually what you're looking for when you're talking about retail packaged coffee is something less than 30 days old to get the peak freshness out of that bag. You're going to be looking for coffee bags that have clearly printed roast dates, and it's also a plus if they have batch numbers on them. Avoid bags that only have an expiration date on them, as you have no way of knowing when this coffee was roasted. It could have been weeks, months, or even up to a year since that coffee was in the roaster to the time you're consuming it. Next, check for the origin and the region of where that coffee was grown. It should be clearly identified on the packaging. Don't be confused by terms like Central American blend or something like that. We're looking for the specific country as well as the specific region within that country where that coffee was grown. We're looking for this because high quality coffee has specific flavor characteristics that most roasters are going to want to highlight. So this one's a little bit of a bonus one. I'm going to count it as number 3, but I don't think this one's absolutely required, and that is the processing method listed on the packaging. And what I mean by processing method, I mean like terms like washed or natural or honey or any of the other myriad of different processing methods that can be used to process the coffee once it's picked off the cherry and get it into a state that can be roasted for final consumption. And while I do think this is important to understanding the overall flavor that's going to come out of that coffee, good tasting notes will guide you a long way here. And so I don't think it's necessarily 100% required to have the processing method listed on the bag of coffee, but it does certainly tell you that the roaster that roasted that coffee is in tune with what's happening in supply chain and is taking those factors into consideration when they're formulating their flavor notes as an end result of that roasting process. Moving on to number 4. Number 4 is having the roast degree listed on the packaging. And what I mean by that is whether it's light, medium, or dark, or some kind of slider or something that indicates the roast degree of that coffee. Now, this one I kind of thought was self-explanatory. I expected this to be on every packaging. Interestingly enough, I found quite a few that did not have roast degree on there. And I do think this is important. I know a lot of specialty roasters only roast to a certain level, and that might be why it's not included on the packaging. But I did notice several that had odd tasting notes listed on the packaging that sounded like a dark roast, but it didn't have any indicator on the packaging itself. And it was right next to something that sounded like a light roast, but I wasn't 100% sure. So to me, even though it might not be an indicator of quality, it might be an indicator of how easy it is to make a decision on a coffee as to whether or not they have the roast degree or some kind of slider listed on the packaging itself. Now, I do want to mention that roast degree is all about personal preference. This isn't telling you to buy a specific coffee or only buy light roast coffee or anything like that. It's all about personal preference and buying the coffee that you want. What I mean by having the roast degree listed on the packaging is making sure that you can make a clear purchasing decision when you come down to those few coffees that you've selected that meet your criteria. So now that we know what to look for, let's talk about some of the red flags that can be an indicator of poor quality in retail coffee. Red flag number one, not having a roast date on the packaging itself. To me, this is the ultimate indicator of whether it's a quality roaster or a quality bag of coffee. If it just has an expiration date on it, that's not good enough. To me, it has to have a roast date. Like I mentioned earlier, coffee, it is its peak freshness 14 days, maybe up to 30 days. After that, it's stale, and I wouldn't personally buy it. Something like this that has a date out into 2025, it is currently June of 2024. This has a best used by April of 2025. I mean, who knows how long it's been since this coffee's roasted. It could be 2 months if they have a year expiration date. It could be longer. Who knows? And I can't guarantee that the coffee in this is fresh at all. So roast date not on the package is red flag number one. Red flag number two is coffee that only comes as pre-ground. And I'm not saying there's not a place for pre-ground coffee being sold. I don't have a problem if you go to a local roaster and buy coffee and then they grind it fresh for you and you consume it. It's still not going to be as fresh as buying whole bean and grinding it fresh every day, but I understand that that's not for everyone. What I'm talking about is coffee that only comes as pre-ground. A lot of your commodity roasters, a lot of the first wave coffee, and even some of the second wave coffee that only sells as ground coffee. Personally, I think you have a better value of buying something else. Whether you go to a roaster and have them grind something fresh for you, or whether you buy whole bean and grind it yourself. I would not personally buy pre-ground coffee from a grocery store because the product that I'm getting is already so much worse. Now, I understand that a lot of you like pre-ground coffee and grew up on certain manufacturers of that coffee. And I understand that everyone and every type of coffee has its place. What I'm talking about here is getting the maximum advantage or output of the money that you're putting in and making sure that you're making informed buying decisions. If you decide that you want a pre-ground coffee or you decide that you want something that's large, mass-produced, commodity-grade stuff, that's your decision. But what I'm talking about is for the person that's looking to elevate their coffee experience and buy the best quality, sustainably sourced, specialty-grade coffee, I would recommend whole bean and grind it yourself every day. Now, another red flag to consider are just generic terms that you'll see on coffee packaging, something like premium blend or 100% Arabica blend or something like that. While that's good, it doesn't mean anything. So like terms like that don't have any standard behind it, which means that it probably isn't indicative of good quality coffee. Coffees that have something behind them won't just use generic terms. So like I mentioned, they'll list the processing method, they'll list the origin and the region that coffee's from. Instead of just using premium blend or something like that, they'll go into detail. And so generic terms don't really do anything. And while I'm on generic terms, I do want to briefly mention some things. I noticed on a couple of these coffee bags, they had terms like non-GMO and gluten-free, or like organic, USDA organic. And these two in particular, I'll tell you, they did not make the list of quality coffee. They do not have roast dates, they do not have blend information or origin or region or stuff like that. But they do have these terms. And I did want to clear something up, especially when you're talking about non-GMO and gluten-free. Every single specialty coffee on the market that I'm aware of, unless there's some weird flour coffee or something like that, is non-GMO and gluten-free. I don't know why this is on this packaging. I didn't know that coffee came GMO and glutened. So don't let this confuse you. This doesn't make it unique from any of the other coffees on the table. It's just marketing and it doesn't make really any sense. The organic is great. Don't get me wrong, organic is great. But organic is not a certification of quality. It's a certification of process. And to me, you can take an organic coffee and you can process and manufacture it poorly. And to me, that's what has kind of happened here. There's no roast date. The expiration date is January 19th, 2025. Again, it's June 2024. It doesn't tell me what's in the blend, other than it's Central and South American coffees. So to me, this doesn't give me enough to justify paying extra price for the organic. I'd rather have an organic coffee that I can trace back to a specific farm or a specific region or something like that. So just a note on organics, not all certifications are created equally. It's great to have certifications, don't get me wrong. Certifications, Rainforest Alliance certifications, Fair Trade certifications, organic certifications, they're all great. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end-all be-all and that that's a high-quality coffee. So just be on the watch out for that. And the last red flag to look for is price point. And I know that this one's probably going to be a sticking point for a lot of people because price can vary so much between coffees. And even like within the coffees that are on the table, it varied so much between what I would consider good or acceptable and great, right? There's a pretty wide range that we're talking about here. But what I'm referring to is exceptionally cheap coffee. Coffee, to do well, is costly. It's costly to the supply chain, it's costly to the roaster, it's costly to the end consumer. But a lot of that goes back to the certifications that are required, to the sustainable practices that are being taken into consideration when you're sourcing coffee. Small batch roasting versus large commodity style roasting where you have higher labor and higher overhead, all factors into these coffees. So it's difficult to find small batch specialty coffee that can compete at a price point similar to some of your commodity grade coffee producers. So what I mean, I'm not saying you need to go out and buy the most expensive coffee on the shelf and that'll be the best one. Just try to avoid the ones that are like oddly lower than everything else. Those are 100% large scale commodity roasters. That's how store brands of stuff are able to charge lower prices because they are able to buy in bulk. They're not having to pay a middleman's fees to put it on their shelves and things like that. Instead, look for something that's relatively similar to all the other prices. Most specialty coffee on shelves are going to be around $12.99 up to like $18 on retail shelves. You'll find some really higher end stuff into the $20, $25 range. But as you're looking for stuff, think of paying $12.99 to $17.99, and that's going to be a pretty good range for your specialty coffee. Okay, so that wraps up our discussion on retail coffee. Can you find great coffee at a retail location? Absolutely, you can. You just have to work a little bit harder to make sure that you're getting the freshest, best selection out of that group of coffees. If you are going to a local supermarket or a local convenience store and you're not finding something within 30 days of being roasted because you're seeing that roast date on the packaging, then I suggest you check out a local roaster or check out someone online like Cold Blooded Caffeine, and we can make sure that you're getting fresh roasted coffee within a couple of days of roasting. That's going to be your best bet. I'm not saying that you should avoid getting coffee at the grocery store or avoid getting it at a convenience store or at a coffee exchange or something like that. Just know that you're going to have to do a little more work in order to make sure that that coffee is going to be up to the standard of what specialty coffee fresh roasted really means. So shameless plug, I do consider Cold Blooded Caffeine, obviously, to be in that higher quality coffee. We do sustainably source all of our coffees. We are Rainforest Alliance certified, and we do a lot of things to try and help promote sustainability within that supply chain coming in. And so if you are looking for a specialty coffee that is going to elevate your coffee experience, consider checking out Cold Blooded Caffeine. You can go to our website, coldbloodedcaffeine.com. We have a wide selection, anything from blends to single origins to some higher end coffees as well for you to try out. I hope you enjoy it. Be sure to comment in this video if you've ever tried our coffee and let us know what you think. That's a really good way to help other people make informed buying decisions if they know someone had a good experience with a specific coffee. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that it helped you on your journey to finding your next great cup of coffee. If you did like this video, please consider giving a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. We really appreciate it, and we will catch you again very soon.